Hey there, imagine the weight of a $200,000 IRS debt crushing your family. Your mom, who had no idea about the financial mess, is now at risk of being dragged into it. It's a nightmare. But today we're going to give you the tools to protect her and navigate this storm with confidence and with faith. So stay with me to learn about innocent spouse relief, understand the legal considerations, and discover how to take immediate action. Here's a spoiler: your mom doesn't have to bear this burden alone, so let's find a solution together. Today's question is: how do I save my mom from my dad's $200,000 IRS nightmare, and should I even try?
In a world where crushing debt keeps you trapped, where living paycheck to paycheck has become your new normal, and where the dream of retirement seems impossibly out of reach, there's hope. Join financial evangelist Ralph E. Stepp Jr., a man who's walked through the fire of financial failure and emerged stronger on the other side. Welcome to Ask Ralph, the show where real-world experience meets biblical truth to break the bondage of financial despair. Get ready to take control of your money, break free from the financial stress, and align your resources with God's purpose for your life. This is Ask Ralph with Ralph E. Stepp Jr.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ask Ralph Show. I'm Ralph, your financial evangelist, and I am thrilled you're here with me today. I promise you this: today's show is going to make a real impact on your life. So let's get started. As always, my goal is to help you escape that cycle of financial shame and do it with confidence. So today we're reaching into a really tough situation, and that's dealing with a massive IRS debt that threatens to overwhelm your parents. And listen, this is a heavy burden, but let me just start by telling you there is hope. Today we're going to explore options like innocent spouse relief. We're going to discuss the legal and financial aspects. And more importantly, I'm going to provide you with actionable steps to help your mom navigate this crisis. So stay engaged, because by the end of this episode, you're going to have concrete solutions to move forward with confidence. Now, yesterday we talked about how to turn your paycheck into purpose. It was a great episode, and if you missed it, be sure to check it out. You can do that at AskRalph.com. We discussed some powerful ways to make your income work for you and align it with your goals and faith. Now, today our listener question comes from a place of deep concern, and when I got this message, I was like, wow, this one is going to be a tough one, but let me share it with you. And this is what this person wrote. He said, "Hi, Ralph, my name is Donald. I'm really struggling right now. My dad has racked up $200,000 in IRS debt, and I'm worried sick about how this will affect my mom. She had no idea about the financial mess, and now she's facing potential liability. I want to protect her, but I don't even know where to start. My mom is a kind, loving person who has always supported our family, but she doesn't deserve this burden. I'm feeling overwhelmed and helpless. Can you help us navigate this nightmare and find a way out?" Well, that was a tough one. So, Donald, let me start by thanking you so much for reaching out. I can only imagine the stress and the worry this situation is causing you and your mom. And listen, it's a heavy burden, but I want you to know, first off, there is hope. I've dealt with a similar situation several times in my 30 years of professional practice, and I'm here to help you find a solution today. So today, as I said, we're going to explore the concept of innocent spouse relief, because I think that's really where you're going to go with your mom. I'm going to tell you about understanding the legal aspects, and I'm going to provide you with actionable steps. I'm going to give you things that you can do to help protect your mother. And Donald, first thing I want you to know is you're not alone in this battle, and I am here to help you. Now, remember, you can submit your questions just like Donald did by going to justaskralph.com, because here's the truth: I love answering your questions, and I love helping you find financial peace. Well, let's start in our search for that financial peace by turning to the Bible for guidance. And I found this verse, Donald, in the book of Galatians, and it's from chapter 6, verse 2, and it says this: "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ." What a very strong verse, and what a way to give us reassurance. And see, this verse reminds us of the importance of supporting one another, especially in times of need. And your mom needs your help right now, Donald. So I am going to give you some tools today to help you get to that point. So let's use this verse as a starting point to find a way out of this financial storm and help your mom carry this burden. And I am truly grateful for the opportunity to help people like you, Donald, and your mom, because listen, the Lord has given me experience, He's given me understanding, and He's given me the ability to guide others through these types of financial challenges with faith and confidence. And it's a blessing to be able to share this knowledge and make a difference in people's lives. So, Donald, let me start by sharing this with you. I've dealt with this situation before. Years ago, I had a client, and we'll call her Susan. Now, this is a story, so wait until you hear this one. Now, Susan's husband, John, had a thriving business, but unbeknownst to Susan, he had been underreporting his income and, yes, falsifying tax returns for years. This was not a good situation. And she knew he was a hard worker, but she just always assumed everything was being done above board. But she learned very quickly that there were some major issues. I'm talking about major issues. And when the IRS finally caught up with him, they sent a notice for, and wait till you hear this one, for a staggering $250,000 in back taxes, penalties, and interest. He was getting hit with all of it. He hadn't paid payroll taxes. He hadn't filed business tax returns. I mean, you name it, the IRS was throwing it at him. And Susan was devastated when she found out. She'd always trusted John. She always trusted him to handle the finances, and she had no idea about the extent of his financial missteps. And you will talk about stress. This stress was overwhelming. It was tearing their marriage apart. Hey, I'm going to tell you right now, it would certainly tear apart mine as well. How about you? Well, the problem is that situation didn't just affect her and John. Their son Alex was deeply affected as well, and he saw his mom struggling and his dad completely avoiding the issue. And the tension, let me just tell you, the tension in this family was terrible. You could have cut it with a knife. Now, Alex was in college at the time, and he felt this heavy load because his mom was always crying on the phone when she called, and he couldn't stand by and watch his mom suffer. I've been in that position where I told you a story about it on this show about how this car dealer was trying to take advantage of my mom. So I can feel where Alex was at. So Alex said he told me after the fact, he said, I decided to take action. Now, Alex was in college and he met with an accounting professor at his school, and they developed a plan. They developed a way to get past this. Alex certainly didn't understand all the nuances of things he needed to do, but this professor advised him to tell his mom what to do. And this is what they did. He collected bank statements showing that Susan didn't even have access to the accounts where these financial issues occurred. She wasn't a party to the business checking account or the business credit card. He also found emails and letters from friends and family that attested to her lack of involvement in the financial decisions. That was really important. The professor told him, you need to prove this. Additionally, he found her employment records and professional correspondence that showed that she was focused on her career. I don't remember exactly what she did at the time, but she was by no means involved in the financial management of the business. Now, Alex, with the help of his professor, filed Form 8857 with the IRS, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's basically the innocent spouse form. And he gave them all the evidence that they had gathered. Now, I'm going to tell you, this wasn't a process that happened overnight. It was a long process. But Susan's genuine lack of knowledge about John, her husband's errors, was clear. And here's the good news. The IRS eventually granted her relief, and the weight of that financial burden was lifted from her shoulders. But here's the thing, that journey didn't end just there, because Alex had to make a tough decision about being involved in this in the first place. See, he knew he needed to support his mom, but he also had to learn how to set those boundaries. So I'm going to talk about that today, how to make this decision. Now, he decided to help both financially and emotionally, but he made it clear to his dad. He said to his dad, you need to take responsibility for your actions. Now, I had a conversation with my dad like that. I can only imagine what would have came back. And for a while, Alex and his dad, they didn't speak at all. The strain was too much. In fact, I remember his mom sharing with me, she said, I felt like I was stuck in the middle between Alex and John, and I didn't know what to do. But here's the good news. Over time, through a lot of open communication and prayer and support of their faith, they were able to restore their relationship. And even his dad, John, finally saw the error of his ways, and he started to correct his tax issues. He hired a professional tax attorney. They ended up hiring me. That's how I got involved. And he came clean with the IRS and started making payments. He started getting back into compliance. Now, this story had a happy ending, but it didn't happen overnight. So, Don, what can we learn from this? Your mom can also find relief through this same process. So let's talk about the meaning of innocent spouse relief as we get started today, because I really feel like that's where we need to go. Innocent spouse relief is designed for situations like this, where one spouse is completely unaware of the other's financial missteps. They just had no idea. So to qualify, Don, your mom is going to need to prove that she didn't know and had no reason to know about the understated tax liability. That's the key part of this. And then the IRS is going to consider whether a reasonable person, that's the test they're going to use in her situation, would have known about the errors. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is not always straightforward when a joint tax return is filed. The bias is going to be against it. The IRS is going to assume that your mother was aware of this. And I did a show a few weeks ago about filing statuses, and I'm going to encourage you to check it out because I discussed this kind of issue, and it's really a main consideration when you're considering filing joint in the first place. But here is what you need to do, Donald. Here's my step-by-step process. The first step is going to be to gather information. This is sort of like preparing for a trial when you've got to prove you were in the dark. And let me just tell you right now, this can be really uncomfortable in a marriage. Trust me, I've seen that happen time and time again. These are not fun times because you're basically trying to prove that you had no idea of what was going on. So you might be asking, what are the records you're going to look for? You're going to look for financial statements. You're going to look for other bank statements, statements that show your mom didn't have any access to the bank accounts where the financial issues occurred. Just like with my client. My client didn't have any access to those accounts. It was a business account. She wasn't involved in the business. You're also going to look at credit card statements. You're going to look for evidence that your mom did not have any credit cards in her name that were used for financial missteps. Now, this can get really hairy with joint accounts because a lot of times you'll be the signature or you'll get an authorized user account for the credit card because maybe that's what you use as a family. But if you're not directly connected to that, if you don't understand what's behind that, they may be a way to escape that particular needed to be involved in that. You also want to keep track of communication records. These are emails and letters, any written communication between your parents that shows your mom was not informed about financial decisions. I remember one particular client, and I'm going to talk about this next, and that's text messages. Keep those text messages that indicate your mom was unaware of the financial situation. I had one client that I worked with many years ago, and she actually sent her husband a text message one day and said, "Hey, are we going to file our tax returns? I was talking to my girlfriend at the club," or something like that, and she was talking about how much they owe this year. And she said, "I'm just wondering if we're going to owe it." And the text message she got back from her husband was, "Oh, don't worry about that. I've got that under control. We already filed those a month ago." And she goes, "Oh, that's great. So did we owe anything?" "No, it was just a little bit, so I had the business pay for it." But that text message was something that I was able to use to show the IRS that my client, the female part of this particular marriage, was completely in the dark. Now, another thing you could do is you could collect witness statements or affidavits. Now, again, I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but this is usually comes about when there's a break in the marriage or there's some kind of rift between the two. But you can get statements from friends or family members or maybe even financial advisors who can attest to your mom's lack of involvement in the financial matters. You can also get written testimonies, accounts from people who can confirm that your mom was not involved in the decision-making leading to that tax debt. Another thing you can get is financial planning documents, maybe budget plans. Any plans or financial planning documents do not include your mother's input. If your mother had no idea what was going on, if she didn't see these bank records, if she didn't see the budgets that were going on behind that, then she can be found, innocent. That's the whole point of this innocent spouse. You also want to look at investment documents, records that show your mom didn't participate in any of the investment decisions. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Oftentimes, these issues trigger a break in a marriage, so you may have to share some legal documents. So let's talk about that because a lot of times I see these situations after there's been a split. Maybe there's a separation and they're moving towards divorce. So you're going to have to share legal documents, whether that be prenuptial or postnuptial agreements. But you can show agreements that specify separate financial responsibilities. You can also look at divorce decrees if they're applicable, documents that outline the financial separation of assets and debts, because you may have a divorce decree that says, hey, this was, in a particular case, this was John's business. This was not her business. This was not Sarah's business. Another thing you can do, and Alex did this, is you look at work and professional records, employment records. Donald, you could see if your mom's got a job that's not involved with your father's business. Look at her employment history. Show her income sources. Talking about how she's financially independent. Maybe she has her own job. She has her own. Now, the problem that you run into is oftentimes they won't have that separation. And you're going to have a more difficult situation to prove because your mother may be financially dependent on your father. And the IRS is going to say, well, you knew this was going on. You can also look at professional correspondence, letters or emails related to her profession that show she was focused on her career and not involved in financial management. Another thing you can look at is educational records. Those are certificates and degrees. These are documents that show your mom's educational background, which may indicate a lack of financial expertise. Now, this is going to be sounding kind of harsh, but maybe some training materials or records of any financial training or workshops she didn't attend. And like I said, this may seem harsh, but I've had to argue cases where I basically had to say that the innocent spouse did not have the level of education to even understand the entire situation. Now, again, that got into a really difficult conversation because I had to say to this spouse one time, I said, listen, I know you don't really understand, the breadth of what's going on here. And I had to really have her write a letter to the IRS that basically said, listen, when it comes to financial stuff, I am not smart about this. I have a hard enough time balancing my own checking account. So again, it's not a comfortable conversation, but it's a conversation that might prove exactly what you're trying to prove. Now, another thing you could look at is medical records or health documents. Medical records that show your mom was maybe dealing with health issues during the time of these financial mess steps, which could have limited her involvement. I remember I had a case once where the wife was actually recovering from a stroke, and she had no clue that her husband was filing false tax returns and signing her name to it. She had no idea about that. So we were able to use those medical records to document that for the IRS. So once you've assembled all that information, the next step is to file that Form 8857. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, this is not for the do-it-yourself. I'll get to that in a moment, but I would highly encourage you to find a professional to help you. So once you've gathered all the necessary documents, you can fill out and submit that Form 8857. It's called a Request for Innocent Spouse Relief, and make sure that you file it as soon as possible because there's a 2-year statute of limitations, so you want to start that right away. Now, because here's the truth. The IRS review can take time. I've seen it take a long time, but it's crucial to stay persistent. Make sure they got it. Make sure they're aware of the situation. And then you've got to keep filing and paying your current obligations. What you don't want to do is just bury your head in the sand and say, well, I filed that form. They'll figure it out eventually. That's a bad plan. And listen, honestly, I truly feel that you should seek professional help. This is not a great, weekend do-it-yourself project. This is the time to consult with an accountant. Maybe you even bring in a tax attorney who specializes in innocent spouse relief. I've talked about it on the show sometimes. Sometimes things get a little bigger than what I or another accountant can handle. You may want to go to an attorney, especially if the IRS is looking at criminal charges or anything like that, because they can help you guide through that process and be an advocate for your mom. And see, here's the deal. Professional help can make a significant difference in ensuring the best possible outcome. My experience has been this. When you're working with a professional accountant or an attorney, the IRS tends to kind of stand up and listen a little bit more. If you're trying to do this yourself, you may get that IRS agent says, oh yeah, that sounds good, blah, blah, blah. We're going to continue. But when you have that coming from an attorney's office or from an accountant's office, I think you're going to find that to be much more beneficial. Well, that's the overall process. But we've really got to make a critical decision here. You've got to ask yourself, and Alex went through this, if you even want to get involved. That's what I talked about at the beginning of the show. So before you make this decision, it's important to consider these things. You got to think about this when you think about, are you really want to getting involved? First thing you got to look at is your motivation. You got to ask yourself why you want to help. Is it out of love, or is it a genuine desire to support your mom, or are there other motivations at play? Make sure your heart is in the right place. I've seen this situations become a sort of a family squabble or a family battle because, dad left mom and left her on the hook for all these taxes. And I'm going to go to bat for mom. And it wasn't about the issue. It wasn't about that. It was about, I just wanted to get back at my dad. This is not a great place to battle those things. You got to also look at the impact on relationships. Think about how your involvement might affect your relationship with not just your mom, but with both your parents. You only get one set of parents. You got to ask yourself, is it going to strengthen your bond or is it going to potentially cause friction? One of the things that I've seen way too many times is that a son or a daughter get involved and then all of a sudden the husband and the wife, they reconcile and then they don't want to talk to those kids at all. So it's important to approach this situation with care and consideration because listen, I've seen this tear families apart. I've seen it cause lifelong breaks between parents and children. You've also got to consider the financial and emotional cost. Like I said, this is not one of your do it yourself weekend projects. You got to consider the financial cost, the emotional cost of getting involved. Are you prepared to handle that potential stress and that burden that's going to come with this journey? Because, like I said, this is a journey. Now, once you decided, you're going to need to set appropriate boundaries. I had a counselor one time, he said, Ralph, it's kind of like building fences. He said, fences make good neighbors. Well, in this case, you've got to really establish clear boundaries. You got to decide how much you're willing to do and communicate these boundaries clearly to your parents. I say, demonstrate that and communicate these to both of your parents because it's important to protect your own well-being while helping your mom. Now, maybe you've made the decision, and Donald, maybe you're here, you decide to get involved. It's important to manage that involvement. So let's talk about how we can do that. What are the best things we can do to manage your involvement effectively? The first thing I'm going to encourage you to do, and I think this is key, is have open communication. Maintain open and honest communication with your mom and your dad. Ensure that she understands the steps you're taking and why. Keep her informed at every stage of the process. And again, I'm going to tell you, I would highly consider hiring professional guidance, relying on a professional guidance from a tax attorney or an accountant, because they can help you navigate the complexities of the legal system and provide expert advice. Listen, unless you're an attorney, unless you're an accountant, you are not going to be in that skill set for handling this on your own. You're also going to need to likely provide emotional support. You're going to need to provide that emotional support to your mom. And one of the things you can do is just let her know you're there for her. If you have that professional handle it, don't get involved in the quagmire of that. Just come alongside your mom and say, listen, I got you. I'm going to help you. Let her know she's not alone in this battle, because if you think about it, she's battling the IRS. Maybe she's battling her husband, your father, and she can feel really alone. I have dealt with this situation so many times where a spouse will come to me and she says, Ralph, I just don't know where to turn. And that is really a difficult situation. Now, also, if you're going to get involved, I want to encourage you to not neglect your self-care. You can get engulfed in this. Remember to take care of yourself, because dealing with financial stress can be emotionally taxing. It was a pretty good play on words there. But make sure you prioritize your own well-being and seek support if you need it. So, Don, in the end, your mom can overcome the situation. I am very confident of that. I'm not sure how it's going to play out. It depends on the circumstances. But by taking these steps, you're not only protecting her from financial hardship, but you're also showing her that she's not alone in this battle. And that may be one of the battles that win the war. You've also got to trust in God's plan for your family and know that He will guide you through this challenging time. Now, if you found today's show helpful, I want you to subscribe to our newsletter so you can find out more about our show. You can do that by going to askralphpodcast.com/newsletter, and you're going to receive daily tips. I'm going to tell you resources and encouragement. I'm going to show you all that went into producing this show to help you on your own financial journey. So let's move into our reflection questions. You know, I always like to end the show with some reflection questions. So let's start with number one, and that's, what steps can you take today to gather the necessary documents for innocent spouse relief? What are those things that you can assemble that we talked about? Is it the financial reports? Is it the education? Is it the medical issues? Start to assemble those things. Now, you might be saying, Ralph, I'm not in this situation. That's fine. Maybe share this episode with somebody who's going through this, or maybe make your children aware if they're getting married, like what to look for in this. So that's our first one. Number two, how can you support your mom emotionally during this process? Understand what your level of engagement is going to be. Are you going to be involved in the day-to-day, or are you going to come alongside her and just be that comforted ear? You're going to be willing to listen. And third, and I don't want to undersell this one, what professional resources can you utilize to ensure the best possible outcome for your mom? Like I said, this is not a do-it-yourself project, so really consider bringing in those professional resources. So now let's take a minute and just talk about our key takeaways from today. We covered a lot, so I just want to give you a recap of all those takeaways. So today we learned about innocent spouse relief and how it can protect your mom from your dad's IRS debt. I know that sounds terrible, but these things happen. We discussed the importance of gathering that information, filling out that Form 8857, and I hope you heard this, seeking professional help. We also talked about how to decide in the first place whether to get involved, and once you do make that decision, how to manage that involvement effectively. And remember, you're not alone in this battle. If you're listening to this and you feel like you're all alone, you're not alone, and there is hope for a positive outcome. And my biggest takeaway is trust in God's plan and then take action to support your mom. You can't just trust, you've also got to take action because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen on its own. Now, tomorrow, we're going to discuss how to start an emergency fund. It's one of the things I talk about on the show all the time. And tomorrow, I'm going to give you 5 practical tips. So join me for another great topic that will help you achieve financial success and grow in your faith. So thank you so much for your time today. I truly appreciate it. Remember, my passion is to help you achieve financial success. I want to see you live out your dreams, and I want to see you grow in your faith. And I know together we can master your finances from a Christian perspective. So stay financially savvy out there, and may God bless you abundantly.
Thank you for joining us on the Ask Ralph Show. And with a simple click to subscribe, we'll invite you back to our next episode. And remember, financial issues don't have to be complicated. Just ask Ralph. The information contained in this episode of Ask Ralph is based on data available as of the date of its release. Saggio Accounting Plus and Ask Ralph Media, Inc. is under no obligation to update this content if changes occur. Applying this information to your specific situation requires careful consideration of all facts and circumstances, and any information provided is not to be considered as financial, tax, or legal advice. Please consult your tax advisor or attorney before acting on any material covered.